But first of all, I'm Jerry Adelmann, president of Openlands, and it's just inspiring to see all of you with us here as we're celebrating a half century of conservation. And we can't thank you enough for all of your support as partners and friends throughout all these years. So continue with your lunch, desserts at the table. And, you know, being in this space is very special for me and for a number of others in this room, because we were here on August 24th, 1984, and where this stage is, right where the podium is, there was a table and chair, and President Reagan sat down and signed legislation to create the first National Heritage Area in the country, the Illinois and Michigan Canal National Heritage Corridor. And this is a landscape scale project that extends from Chicago at Lake Calumet and at Navy Pier all the way down to LaSalle, Peru. Today, there are 49 National Heritage Areas around the nation, and many more that are being considered, including one that would be a bridge between Illinois and Indiana, connecting Indiana, the dunes, the National Lakeshore, with the Calumet area and Lake Michigan and Chicago. So this is a very special moment, and a number of you were with us on that day. As already has been said by Ann, you know, Openlands was formed during the birth of the popular environmental movement, 1963. We were initially a project of the Welfare Council of Metropolitan Chicago, hence the name Openlands Project. Subsequently, we dropped it because everyone said, "What's your project?" We said, "We have many." You know, it has been a tremendous privilege for me to serve as the head of staff for half of that time. And I want to share, no, thank you. You know, I've obviously had a chance to observe some things, and there are some really important kind of salient characteristics, guiding principles of our work, and I'd like to share a few of them with you. As our chair, Jill Allreed, noted already, that we do our work almost always in partnership, in collaborations, because there's so much to do, such a huge region, and it's with you, many of you today, who represent that community of partners who with us achieve extraordinary results. And I think if you look to all the teams, the committees, the boards that our staff serves on, that's just indicative of how we operate and how we love working with so many of you. You know, as already was mentioned too, we were one of the first conservation organizations in the nation to work in a metropolitan area. So of necessity, we often, you know, had to innovate. We were pioneers. And often our model is to create new models. So the I&M is an example, the Prairie Path that's been mentioned, the first rail-to-trail conversion, the first metropolitan greenways and blueways, you know, water trails plan, and so many more. Another kind of characteristic of our work is that we take the long view. You know, we're here to stay in this three-state metropolitan area. This is our home landscape. We have a strategic vision that we want to you know, protect and restore, and in some cases create that extraordinary web of green that ties the city of Chicago and our neighborhoods with surrounding communities to the ex-urban fringe, that improves, you know, the quality of life for all of our residents. So when you take something like the Medewan National Tallgrass Prairie, the former Joliet Arsenal, as we go back through the minutes of the early board meetings, even in the 1960s, our board members said, keep an eye on it. Someday they're going to close that down. Hackmatack, the National Wildlife Refuge that was mentioned, 8 years in the making. So some of these things take a long time. And as our founding president, Jeff Short, said, often you have to save a site at least twice. You know, so again, a place-based group like ours has a very special role. And we believe that nature is vital to all people, and our work is to connect people to nature where they live at all these different scales. So we're always kind of fostering a sense of place. Now, our policy work takes us to Springfield, takes us to Washington, but our programmatic work, our land acquisition, our restoration, our programs are here, based in this region and in the city of Chicago and the surrounding parts of northeastern Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. And we're always kind of challenged with what's the best way to create a culture of conservation, to really connect with people so that they can benefit from nature, but they also become stewards of that nature. And often we have to be kind of innovative and creative in the ways we do it. And one of the vehicles has been working with artists. And you'll see public art at the neighborhood scale in many of our green spaces, at our schools, certainly in a very dramatic way at our Openlands Lakeshore Preserve. But one of the media that we've focused on consistently and with a great deal of impact is photography. And the celebrated landscape photographer Terry Evans, who's with us today, has been one of our best partners in that and worked with us on so many projects, and one of which I'm sure you're familiar with is Revealing Chicago, which during 2005, this was a partnership with Metropolis Strategies, and it was a major outdoor exhibit in Millennium Park for the summer and fall, and really engaged people in thinking about the region as a whole and the kinds of challenges and opportunities that we face in the future. So there are so many milestones of Openlands. We'd love to share all of them with you. Can't in this brief time. The booklet that you have at your places does give a chronology, but I'd like to share a brief video with you that outlines at least just a few of those kind of landmark moments in the history of Openlands.
In 1963, the Openlands Project was established as a project of the Welfare Council of Greater Chicago. The new organization would help lead the way in conservation projects in the Chicago region throughout the 1960s. In 1971, the Lake Michigan Federation became independent from Openlands. It would later become the Alliance for the Great Lakes. In the 1980s, Openlands was at the forefront to create the nation's first National Heritage Area, the I&M Canal National Heritage Corridor. In the early 1990s, Openlands' work in the city of Chicago reached a new intensity. The launch of Tree Keepers in 1991 would usher in a corps of volunteers dedicated to the urban forest. Planning work ultimately led to programs on the ground, including courses about community gardens. In 1996, an Openlands idea that stretched back to the 1960s was realized when the former Joliet Arsenal was transformed into Middaywin National Tallgrass Prairie. Whether with coalitions such as Chicago Wilderness, or artists, or schools. These projects were realized through partnerships. Openlands takes a landscape-scale view to opportunities such as restoration, or connecting a web of blue and green throughout our region. In 2011, Openlands reached a milestone with the public opening of the Openlands Lakeshore Preserve, the first piece of publicly accessible land managed by Openlands. After advocating for the creation of Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge, Openlands secured the refuge's first piece of land. Openlands believes that nature is vital to all people, and this belief will drive our work for the next 50 years.
While anniversaries, I think, are appropriate moments to step back and reflect on the past and celebrate those great milestones, as an organization, we're always looking to the future. And as I said, we take the long view. And one project I'd like to mention that I think does that in a dramatic way is a partnership with Metropolis Strategies and the Forest Preserves of Cook County. Cook County Forest Preserves is celebrating its 100th anniversary. It's a multi-year anniversary. They were national leaders in protecting rare nature close to where people live, and that's resulted in 11% of Cook County now being protected as part of the Forest Preserve system. 69,000 acres, pretty amazing. President Toni Preckwinkle, who was with us earlier, has provided extraordinary leadership, and she's put together an amazing team. Arnold Randall, who's General Superintendent, also chairs Chicago Wilderness, Mary Laraya, the deputy, and talented staff. And so the president realized that this was a time, an anniversary, to reignite that passion and that vision of the founders, but also to connect to contemporary issues. So she formed a very high-level commission of dedicated and diverse civic and business leaders. In fact, our own Wendy Paulson from our board is one of the 4 co-chairs. There's also a group of advisors, our colleague organizations who work closely with the Forest Preserve. And we all realize that preserving and restoring nature in an urban center within a changing world, requires creative strategies and really a culture of innovation. So the kinds of topics that this plan touches on include things like climate change, changing demographics, the connection for human health and wellness to nature and the outdoors, which we'll hear about more from our speaker in just a moment. So we're very excited about this partnership. The plan will be unveiled late this year, early next. I think it'll be relevant not only to the Forest Preserves of Cook County, but to all who manage land to really have a better understanding about making this resource as important as it should be and making the connections that contemporary society requires. We have a long history of collaboration with the Cook County Forest Preserve. In fact, Cap Sowers, their legendary general superintendent, was a founding member of our board. So we look forward to continuing that over the next decades. George Overton was co-founder with Jeff Short of Openlands. And George would always say to me, Jerry, the most important thing that we can do is raise the threshold of hope. We were lucky to have a lot of visionary people early in our history. And one of them, of course, is Gunnar Peterson, our founding executive director, and who was a real leader in the early environmental movement, locally and nationally. And his daughter, Liesl, sent me a lovely email, a note, and reminded me about George's words at the dedication of the Interpretive Center at Goose Lake Prairie. Goose Lake Prairie is the largest remnant of the tallgrass prairie east of the Mississippi, one of our most important early projects. And Gunnar moved to Canada, had some heart issues, but was pulled into service again there, had a heart attack and died in '76. And so in '81, the state of Illinois decided to name the visitor center there after Gunnar. His family came and others. And at that ceremony, George Overton said, "It is also the task of the conservation movement to leave a human heritage as well, a generation to come of men and women who will care and who will earn respect, not only in what they do, but for how they do it. In this sense, we are all Gunnar's heirs." And so in that spirit, we all at Openlands look forward to working with all of you. We are all Gunnar's heirs as we continue to raise that threshold of hope and make nature accessible to all people no matter where we live. So thank you for your abiding support and commitment, and we look forward to continuing these strong relationships in the years and decades ahead. Thank you. We have a very important guest who just arrived, who's on an extremely tight schedule, and that is our senior senator, Dick Durbin. And Senator Durbin has been I don't think he needs an introduction. And we are so fortunate in Illinois to have him, as is the nation. So, Senator, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I want to apologize for interrupting your program, but I just wanted to come by and say hello, welcome all of you, and to say it is great to be home in Chicago. It's great to be anywhere other than Washington, D.C. And I want to say a word about Openlands and a personal, specific case, the Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge. I want to commend you. It was last year when the Secretary of Interior, Ken Salazar, came to the Chicagoland area, and he and I went up and saw this beautiful piece of real estate and thought to ourselves, what a magnificent legacy we're leaving to future generations by protecting and encouraging this. It is only one example of many that can be raised and cited today for the works of Openlands and all of you who support it. It made me feel so good, and I know Secretary Salazar felt exactly the same. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for showing public and private partnerships can work to make sure that at the end of the day, we leave a greater legacy for future generations. And my personal congratulations to all the awardees today, and apologies for holding off one award here when I came up to say hello. But thank you for your good work, and it's great to see you here. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Well, that's the kind of interruption we like having. Yeah. Thank you, Senator, for your amazing leadership, and especially for your support of conservation here in Illinois and really around the nation.